At the Hyundai Getaway Sales Event, get deals so right, it almost feels wrong. Now's the best time to get that Hyundai you've always wanted. Plus, every new Hyundai comes with America's Best Warranty and 3 years or 36,000 miles of limited complimentary maintenance. Don't think you can get away with all that? Think again. The Hyundai Getaway Sales Event. Visit your local Hyundai dealer today. It's a great day for a new Hyundai.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means, that's Stefan, Krajisnik, and that's Andrew Gillis. This is your Thursday pod. This idea kind of strung up into my head yesterday when we were going through everything that could go wrong with Ohio State, because everything is bad. It's all dark. Ohio State is in a bad place. That's what some of the feedback has been from that podcast. It's like, oh man, gotta love as a fan hearing everything that can go wrong with your team. I blame those two. I blame Stefan and Andrew. I tried to shed a light at the end of it.
I will gladly come out publicly and say whose idea it was to do that pod. I have no shame in admitting who that was.
I tried, guys. I tried to put some glitter on the you-know-what, but they were like, no, you said this is a you-know-what pod, so that's what we're going to do. So fine, that's what we did. Everything that can go wrong. And it spurred from that idea of playing a game of would you rather with Ohio State's quarterback situation. 2 5-star recruits, Stefan St. Clair, a 5-star recruit in the 2025 recruiting class. He is a true freshman. And then Julian Sayin, who was a number 1 quarterback in the 2024 recruiting class. And then a third-year guy as a top 250 recruit in Lincoln Kienholz. That's the room this year. And Stefan St. Clair is clearly QB3, while Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz continue to battle it out to be Ohio State's next starting quarterback. And I'm just trying to put in perspective what we think of the room. And so I wanted to play a game of would you rather, and I'm going to play it on 2 fronts, guys. It's right now, heading into the season, would you rather have Ohio State's room versus the rooms we're going to talk about? But it's also, because we're going to do it through the schedule. Would you rather have Ohio State's quarterback room on the day that they have to play the team that we're going to do the would you rather against? So we're going to go through Ohio State's 12-game regular season schedule. I've also at the end there added some other teams that Ohio State could potentially see in a Big Ten championship game or a college football playoff stage, just for the sake of adding more equations to this of what we think of Ohio State's quarterback room right now heading into the season, but also projecting a little bit where we think it could go. So far, the Ryan Day era, the quarterback room has produced a Heisman Trophy finalist in the Big Ten Quarterback of the Year in 2019, the Big Ten Quarterback of the Year in 2020, a Heisman Trophy finalist in the Big Ten Quarterback of the Year in 2021, Heisman Trophy finalist in the Big Ten Quarterback of the Year in 2022, all 13 quarterback selection in 2023. And then last year, if I'm not mistaken, second team all Big Ten quarterback who also won a national championship game. That's been Ohio State's quarterback room. And I think a lot of those years, you would take that room against the field. In 2019, I think the conversation would have been, hey, would you take Ohio State's quarterback room? And maybe the only two you would take by the end of the year would have been Clemson and LSU, and a healthy Bama room with Tua would have maybe been in that conversation as well. Same thing in 2020. It's kind of like Justin Fields, you take him, and the only guy you maybe take over him is Clemson's quarterback room because they had Trevor Lawrence. In 2021, I think by the end of the year there, it's like, yeah, I'll take C.J. Stroud over the field with the only real competition being Bryce Young at Alabama. The following year, you probably throw USC's Caleb Williams into that mix as well. In 2023, I'm not 100% sure you would have taken Ohio State's quarterback room over everybody in the Big Ten. Or maybe you would have because your fight would have been the depth of the room versus the top of the room, which is where Michigan was better than Ohio State. And then obviously the same thing this past year. Would you take Ohio State's 5-guy room versus, I don't know, Dylan Gabriel was was the Big Ten quarterback of the year, was the Heisman Trophy finalist. So I want to do it with this 2025 quarterback room going through the schedule. August 30th, they play Texas. So that's out the gate here. So what you have right now is Arch Manning, who has thrown a career 95 passes, completed 66.3% of them for 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions as Texas's backup the last 2 seasons behind Quinn Ewers. He's their starting quarterback. That's been pretty much proclaimed. So this doesn't have to be a room conversation. He's the starting quarterback. They've got some young guys behind them that are either developing or there for more of a backup role. Stefan, I'll start with you. Right now, heading into the season, would you rather have a situation where you know Arch Manning is your starting quarterback and you've known it for 9 months? Or would you rather have Ohio State's quarterback room, and why?
Yeah, I was hoping I didn't have to be the one to go first.
That's why you're going first.
I would have enjoyed an exercise where Ohio State plays Grambling in Ohio and some other teams first instead of Texas out the gate. It's tough, man. I went back and forth just because I'm not in the boat of 100% sold on Arch Manning yet, like some people are. But at the same time, I have to look at maybe I'm in the Ohio State bubble and my belief in Julian Sayin is a little bit higher than the general public. And where do you it's hard. You go back and forth. I ultimately said I think I would rather have Arch Manning in Texas' situation at quarterback because he's got starting experience before. He started last year, actually started an SEC game, which that was a horrific Mississippi State team. So that was like starting against a MAC school, to be quite honest. But got starting experience, has been around college football for a couple of years. Talent and evaluation and things of that nature, I think, is fairly similar to Julian Sayin and what Ohio State's got on their roster. So it's tough. But I think at that point of the season, playing week 1, I would rather have the guy who's at least got some starting experience and has been around it for 2 years as opposed to 1. So I'll go with Arch Manning.
Arch Manning has played 260 career snaps. 233 of them came last year, and he played 65 against Louisiana Monroe and 64 against Mississippi State when he filled in for Quinn as a starter. He played 1 snap against Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl where they used him as a runner. Other games where he played at least 10 snaps. Florida, he played 28. Georgia, he played 11. UTSA, he played 29. And then Colorado State, he played 26. And you're going with Arch Manning because he has played 260 career snaps and 129 of them were as a starting quarterback versus Julian Sayin played 27 career snaps and Lincoln Kienholz has played 68 career snaps. And I'm pretty sure, 40 of them. So 40 of his 68 snaps came in a game that was 2 years ago that he wasn't supposed to be on the field. So you are saying everything else is equal. You think the talent is equal. Both of these rooms have a guy in it that was the number 1 quarterback in their recruiting class. And so if you think it's like-minded talent, you'll take the guy who's at least done it a little bit before.
Yeah.
Andrew, do you agree?
I do. It was close, but I do agree. I'm taking Arch. This was a really interesting conversation because maybe I paid attention to this news more than anybody else just because I'm from the area. Everybody was talking about how DC got the 2027 NFL draft, and they were like, "Hey guys, this could be the Arch Manning draft. He could be the number 1 overall pick in 2027." And it's like it feels like people are a little bit out over their skis like on Manning, and I think I'm not there yet. I'm pretty much in lockstep with what Stefan said. I'm not there of this guy's the chosen one. This guy's going to be the next number 1 overall pick. He might not even make it to 27 because he's going to be a first overall pick or a top 5 pick in 26. I'm not there, but this is such an interesting conversation to me because it really comes down to what you believe and what you believe about Arch. We haven't seen a ton of him. I do think the experience matters. We talked about it on the previous pod. Ryan Day has said experience enough and talked about experience enough in spring football to where you're thinking maybe we should start to listen to him. But Arch Manning is either a future top 3, top 5 pick if people who are high on him believe. And if they're right, that's what he is. And we have to sit there and go, man, Sark really screwed that up. And Sark maybe should have pushed Quinn out the door. And you have a top
Why is
3
that? Wait,
overall. And
how would that
I'm
screw
thinking
it up?
about his talent. And
No, for sure. But
what,
like I guess like what would that even look like? Stark screwing that up. Quinn Ewers got to the Final Four 2 years in a row.
well, that's the other thing.
Texas was in the dump. Texas was in a dumpster fire before Quinn Ewers got there. So
yeah,
what's
and
the?
it's
I don't know if I just don't know if Texas wins a national championship this year. I don't think it's a situation of Steve Sarkisian picked the wrong quarterback for 2 years, unless it's very, very obvious. If Texas wins a national championship, okay, they could have won the national championship the last 2 years. They came within a Jack Sawyer strip sack of tying that game, and then who knows what happens. It's kind of the same thing the year before where they were on the goal line and couldn't punch it in. If Arch Manning wins the Heisman this year, then sure, you can feel like, oh, they wasted a year if they could have had Heisman Trophy quarterback play in 2024. Right. But I don't know.
And that's what I'm saying. It feels like people are on both ends of the spectrum.
Already one of the best teams. I don't. Arch has to win the Heisman for me to feel like he chose the wrong quarterback.
But that's like years. But we're talking about chose the wrong quarterback in 2024 or 2025?
24.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Arch in 24. We saw him against Georgia. He wasn't like
right.
They chose the right guy last year.
Right. It's okay for quarterbacks to not be ready to play until year 3. That's a very normal thing.
So I think the experience mattered for me here, having played in big games before, having played in moments like that before. You know, I said this about Julian, like, I understand you're going to be at home. I understand there's going to be a lot of juice in that building. They're going to unveil the national championship banner, and they're going to have the celebration kind of continue into that night. And it's going to be a great night in Columbus or a great day in Columbus, depending. But it's still going to be a really tough environment for Julian to make his first start. And I know Arch doesn't have a ton of game experience. Arch doesn't have a ton of kind of experience like that, but it does matter. It does matter that you've been in a college program for another year. It does matter, I think, that you have playing experience against, an SEC team. I understand. I think it was Mississippi State that he started against. So it's like, are they really even an SEC team? But it's like, I think that matters. So I went with Arch. I think the talent's there, and I think the experience matters.
Depends on who they beat. They beat Alabama. They're a real SEC team. They beat Vanderbilt. They're not a real SEC team. What's the most consequential game Arch Manning has played in? Played meaningful snaps in? Like, because we're saying, he's been in these situations. When has he been in these situations? They beat Mississippi State 35-13. They beat Louisiana Monroe 51-30. And those are the games where he's been their starting quarterback.
He hasn't been in those big situations. I didn't say that. I just said that he started.
Right. Andrew did. He said he's been in those situations. What's the situation?
I mean, he's played. Like,
right. He's played football. That's true.
Yeah.
But if we're like, who's been in the most meaningful football games? Lincoln Keno's is like 40 snaps against Missouri in the Cotton Bowl were a lot more stress-filled than what Arch Manning has had to play against. And I'm not saying I'm picking Arch Manning too because he's played more football and he's been around a little bit. He's been in college football for 3 years. Julian Sayin has been in college football for 12 months. And he's more talented than the guy in Ohio State's room that's been here for 3 years. So I'm with you. I'm picking Arch Manning as well. But I don't know. Was it like 100% I would take Texas's quarterback room right now over Ohio State's?
No.
I was kind of prepared if you both took Arch to come in and be a devil's advocate, but then you made me go first, so then I had to pick one. Like, I go back because you could talk me into like, okay, yeah, Arch is just as talented as Julian Sayin, and I went with the a little bit more experienced route. But what if Julian, like we talked about in the last pod, what if Julian's just a guy? What if he comes out against Texas and throws 4 touchdowns, and it's like, okay, shove your experience, where? Like, I'll take the guy who's just better.
Because who also was in his 3rd year as a former 5-star recruit? Kyle McCord didn't look great all the time. I don't know about Arch Manning's draft stock. I don't cover Texas, so I don't have to deep dive into that draft stock thing. I've been listening. Obviously, I've been paying more attention to Arch Manning in that world because that's the first game we're going to cover this year is Ohio State, Texas. And someone brought up a good point of like, he's a Manning. And I don't mean that by how good he is. I mean by how the Mannings handle things. Both Eli and Peyton stayed in college a year longer than maybe people thought they would when they could have been first-round draft picks, and they stayed a year longer in college. I don't have any expectations for Arch in terms of how good he may or may not be, how his family's going to handle some of this stuff, but I also don't have to worry about that stuff. I just have to worry about what it means for Ohio State. I thought about picking Julian Sayin because he's at home. And I thought about picking Ohio State's quarterback room because it's going to be at home. And so it tends to lean towards like he's at home, he's more comfortable, he's in his environment. I think I might take this environment. I might take the guy who's at home. But we're not having a like head-to-head, like who might win the game conversation. We're having if you could switch rooms, essentially.
You could make Arch Manning be the guy playing at home.
Right. Would you take it? And I feel like it's a wash a little bit. And so because it's a wash, the guy who's played 125 more snaps than the other two guys combined, I understand why it's the safe route, but it's what we're taking. But it's also while acknowledging that right now we're taking the guy who's played 120 more snaps in college football. We could get to the end of the first quarter on August 30th and be like, yeah, no, Ohio State's fine. We're okay. Keep that guy. It could be easily the C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young situation of like, sure, we take Bryce Young, but it's because he's good, but we're cool with what we have with C.J. Stroud. Sure, we'll take Trevor Lawrence, but we're kind of cool with what we have with Justin Fields. I think that's the more likely scenario that plays out here, where both of these guys are good in a way that's like, I don't want to trade. I'm fine. I've got an elite quarterback. For Emily State, we take Ohio State's room. It's not a conversation. Andrew, I am going to allow you to be an alumnus for a second. Parker Navarro played 941 snaps for Ohio last year as a starting quarterback. This is the second year as Ohio starting quarterback. So we just had this conversation with Arch. He's played 120 more snaps than those two guys combined. This guy's played 800 more snaps than the other two guys combined. I don't even care if you believe it in your heart. You have to do it because they gave you your degree. I want you to make the case for why Ohio State should trade quarterback situations with Ohio. And I'm going to give you the next 5 minutes to make the case. I don't care if you believe it or not. You have to wave the flag for your university right now.
Yeah, one quarterback won a conference championship last year. And one didn't. One quarterback went 20 of 27 for 235 yards and 2 touchdowns passing, with 13 carries, 67 yards rushing, and 2 scores, combined for 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards of total offense in a 35-point win over your heated rival. Wouldn't that be nice to get on this podcast one time and be like, wow, Ohio State's quarterback looked awesome against their heated rival, their most hated rival from about 3 hours away? Wouldn't that be something? Parker Navarro did that. Pay no mind to the fact that they lost in the regular season. They made up for it. And then they won in the MAC championship game. And he looked really good in the bowl game, too, against Jacksonville State. I believe that was the Cure Bowl. And Parker Navarro, great dual threat quarterback, rushed for over 100 yards. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in his season with the Bobcats. He is a 66% completion percentage. Not a overly talented passer, but I think he got better as the year went on. And he's a great running threat. It's kind of funny that Parker Navarro might be one of the more mobile quarterbacks that Ohio State is going to play in 2025. Like Arch Manning is obviously a runner, but like there are some other quarterbacks that we're going to get to on this list where you're just like, that quarterback's not taking off unless like there's dogs chasing him. Like he's just going to sit in the pocket and stand there. So Parker Navarro, he can move, and he's a good running quarterback, good mobile quarterback. Stand up and cheer for the MAC champs. All right, I'm done.
If Ohio State didn't recruit quarterbacks at the level it did, let's just say they recruited quarterbacks at the level that Michigan did. If Parker Navarro was in the portal and Ohio State did not recruit, let's just say they are an A-level school when it comes to quarterback recruiting. If they were a B-level school when it came to quarterback recruiting and they were in a situation this year where maybe they needed to go get a veteran and Parker Navarro hopped in the portal, would you say, as someone who covers Ohio State should take a look at this guy?
My question would be, to do what? To start?
Yeah. I mean, that's the conversation we're having.
No, it would not be to start. No, I would not do that.
Okay. I'm just Why not?
You're telling me if Parker Navarro was in the portal right now, one of the like Big Ten schools, like you don't think like Wisconsin would go after him?
I mean, Indiana pulled an OU's quarterback the year before that.
That's what I had.
Oh,
I had written
for
down
Ohio
here.
State, yeah. For Ohio State, no. I thought that's what you were asking me.
Yeah,
He's saying if Ohio State isn't recruiting at the level that it does,
correct.
quarterback.
Sure.
So like you have to think of it like if Ohio State's quarterback room was closer to
Yeah.
Wisconsin than it is Ohio State, would you take Parker Navarro? Yeah.
Still,
We're assuming they don't have 5 stars up and down the quarterback room every year.
Yeah.
In this situation.
And look, and to be fair, Ohio just produced a quarterback before Parker Navarro that went to Indiana and led them to the college football playoff.
So that's what I'm asking.
But I don't think Navarro is as good as Rourke was. I think Rourke was better. So I think you would have to be at like C level. I think you'd have to be at like, maybe like whatever a step below Wisconsin and Michigan and maybe even 2 steps below them, and maybe you kind of make that move. But yeah, not even Ohio State's at A level. It's not at B level for me. Maybe not even C level.
I had written down that if you thought if you liked what Curtis Rourke was last year and you would rather have Curtis Rourke than Ohio State's current quarterback room, that you could maybe talk yourself into this. But I agree with Andrew. I think Parker Navarro was like a slight step down. Like when we were going through this exercise, Grambling right away, I think we all wrote it off. But Ohio made me stop and think, and it was like, okay, if this were to happen and this were to happen, maybe I would consider it. Right? Like it's not as far away as like you would initially say. Would you rather have Ohio's quarterback room? I don't think it's like that far removed to be like, whoa, that's crazy.
And the reason why that's a necessary conversation, because now they still have to play Ohio, and Marshall was able to move the ball on them last year. And so essentially you're asking a question of, okay, what can we expect to see from Parker that might help us inform about the team we do cover? And what could he maybe poke some holes in? And so along with the fact that a guy who was literally in his position went to a Power 4 school, and they had the best season they've had in 30 years. So what are we talking about here? Because there is something to just being an older quarterback. You've seen that value of the guy who's older be able to make that jump across college football. Could Parker be one of those guys? You're saying no. Okay, that's fine.
The last thing I will say, when we get to this, we'll obviously have this conversation when we get to Ohio week. Maybe we should have Jimmy on that podcast just for
We're
fun.
not going to have Jimmy on that.
Well, it is an in-state rivalry.
It's not.
Navarro will test Ohio State's defense in terms of like read option, RPOs, mobile quarterback. That is going to be, I think, very interesting to me, is that, if I know Arch can run and I know Arch can move, but Parker can scoot as well. And I think that is going to be a nice little challenge for Ohio State and a good litmus test to see, okay, here's how we can defend the read option. Here's how we can defend RPOs and things like that.
And then Ohio State's got a bye, so that's where we'll take our first bye and take a break here, and then we'll come back and hit up the next 4 quarterback rooms on Ohio State's schedule here on Buckeye Talk.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks, or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Visit USAA.com/bundle.
Bundle savings are off total premium, not available in all states or in all situations. To qualify, auto policy must be active prior to property policy issue, subject to change. Restrictions apply. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis as we run through the quarterback situations on Ohio State's 2025 schedule, trying to see where we think, which room would you take? Which would you rather have? Ohio State's young, talented room where it is a lot of projecting versus maybe some rooms, some more established names. Washington, not necessarily in that same boat, though. Stefan, Damon Williams, number 205 player, number 12 quarterback in the 2024 recruiting class. Spent his freshman year at Arizona. Now he's at Washington, where he's expected to take over as the starting quarterback. Let me ask this first. Will Rogers was Washington's starting quarterback last year, and he had a very different year than he had in previous tenures at Mississippi State when he was leading the conference in passing yards and passing touchdowns and completion percentage. If this were a year ago, Washington's quarterback room versus Ohio State's quarterback room, can you make the case for, I take Will Rogers because he's played 3,400 plus snaps in his career, even if the upside isn't the same as where Julian Sayin, Xavier St. Clair, Lincoln Kienholz might be?
I will be kind of attached to this because I covered Will Rogers for
That's why I'm asking.
3 years. I would say no. There was a belief that, after Mike Leach passed, that Will could kind of show that he could play in a non-air raid, and it just didn't go great. It was a very tough situation. I mean, Zach Arnett was not a good head coach. It was just a mess. Obviously, when your coach passed away, it's a tough situation. But then also wasn't great at Washington. I do think he was kind of a air raid. I guess like a Gardner Minshew type, where it's like played very well in the air raid. Put him in some other system, it's not quite as great. So I don't think he would like fit into Ohio State perfectly. Maybe Purdue or Wisconsin could have made it work with their air raid.
Wisconsin trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Okay, so with Damon, Andrew, I don't think this is much of a conversation for a guy who he did actually spend his freshman year at Washington after originally signing with Arizona. 297 snaps last year. So he played more still than what Lincoln Kienholz and Julian Sayin got over the last 2 years. But I'm not sure a guy who is from 187. I mean, Julian Sayin's 6'1", and people are calling him little. So I'm just not sure if there's a case to be made with this year's room. Even Stefan said there's not even a case to be made with an experienced guy, given the system he was successful in. I don't think there's much of a case you can make for, yes, you would take Washington's quarterback situation over Ohio State's situation.
No, not a debate. I looked it up. Something that always makes me giggle is like the sponsor names in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. He had a really nice Sun Bowl against Louisville. He went 20-32 for 374, 4
He
scores.
balled out. That was real ones watched that game. That's electric. He was balling out.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, real ones watched that game. That might have been when we went to go see the Lakers play the Cavs in LA right before the Rose Bowl on New Year's Eve. So I must have missed that one. Darn. When you miss the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, it's hard to recover from that one. People are going to be talking about that game for generations. No, I don't think it's a conversation now, and I don't think it's a conversation on September 27th. Like, I especially don't think it's a conversation on September 27th, because if we're going to say, would you rather have their quarterback situation now? It's like, the only argument you got is against Oregon, he actually had some decent numbers, 17-20 for 201 and a touchdown. Now, that was in mop-up duty, and I know Washington kind of got spanked in that game. That was pretty not great. So it's like, that's the argument that you have. It's like, okay, well, he has played well against other big-time opponents, and, he played in a bowl game and whatever, but it's not a great argument. And then especially when you get to the point of September 27th, Julian Sayin will have played Texas and then an FCS school and a MAC school and then had a bye week. He will have had a month as the starting quarterback at Ohio State. So I'm not doing it now, and I'm super not doing it on September 27th.
I don't know if there's an argument, but I think he's a pretty good quarterback. And I think he showed flashes of it. The one thing that I kind of question is, obviously, he followed Fish from Arizona to Washington, so is he maybe kind of a fit in that system more than like a guy who can kind of plug and play wherever? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm like officially in the boat of, I think like 3 times in this last week, I brought up that Washington game as like a really tricky spot for Ohio State. Now, coming off the bye, maybe that helps, but I don't know. If this guy's good, and he's good by week 4 or 5, whatever that is, keep an eye out. He's going to be tough to stop.
He doesn't have the build-up that Ohio State starting quarterback's going to have, obviously, because Ohio State's got to play Texas week 1. Colorado State, UC Davis, Apple Cup, and then Ohio State. So not quite, you're not playing a playoff team in your first 4 games of the season. What if that completion percentage says it is a little bit of scheme more than him. 85% against Oregon, 81.3% against Louisville in the bowl game. It's efficient. 82 for 105 on the year for 944 yards and 8 touchdowns and 1 interception, and the bulk of that came against Oregon and Louisville. What if he's the better quarterback on Saturday, September 27th? Are we completely shutting off that idea that this guy can be the better quarterback that day. Even if long-term we still take Ohio State's quarterback.
I think it's possible.
Kind of.
I think it's possible.
Yeah, it's possible, but
It sounds like I like this guy a lot more than Andrew does.
It does.
No, I think we have to put into context that like this guy can be good, and we could talk about him being maybe on an all Big Ten team at quarterback at the end of the year. Like you could have conversations about other guys that are good, but I'm not taking Julian. Or I'm not taking him over Julian. I think Julian's better.
Based on what?
Based on talent, based on throwing ability. Like, I think the scheme is a big part of this, and like that does kind of muddy the waters a little bit because, like, you know, I would love to see. I don't have this in front of me. I don't have the stats. I would love to see his average depth of target. Like, I would love to kind of know what are they asking him to do. What are they like? Is this like a bubble boy offense where they just say, "All right, you know, we're gonna run arbs and slants, and we're gonna throw bubble screens, and that's how you're gonna get your yards." And it's a bunch of yak receivers, and that's fine. I'm not saying you can't win football games that way, but it means that when people get on a podcast and start yelling, I don't have to say that this guy's the greatest quarterback that is ever gonna happen in the Big Ten.
Bubble boy. Okay,
Bubble boy
so I have the stats here.
For average depth of target? Okay.
So Will Howard last year, of his throws, 11.1% were deep shots, so that's 20 yards or further. 23.9% were medium, which is 10 to 19 yards. 42.8 were short, that's 0 to 9 yards. And then 17.3 were behind the line of scrimmage. That's Will Howard's numbers. Kyle McCord's numbers the year before that. Deep shots, 13.6% of his attempts. Medium shots, 25.7% of his attempts. Short was 41.2% of his attempts. 13.6% were behind the line of scrimmage. CJ Stroud the year before that. Deep shots, much higher than the other two, 15.6. Medium, 29.7. Short, 37.9. Behind the line of scrimmage, 12.8. So they pushed the ball down the field with CJ, and the Houston Texans have showed us why. And then the year before that, 14% were deep shots, 27.3% were medium shots, 40.6% were short shots, 14.7% were behind the line of scrimmage, which I think is interesting. A lot of short when it's the first year of a guy starting at Ohio State, and then with CJ, obviously they started putting in the intermediate game a little bit more. Damon Williams's breakdown. 0.4% of his shots were deep shots. He was 9 of 13 for 4 touchdowns. So 4 of his 8 touchdowns came on deep shots. And he had 6 big-time throws on deep shots. 7 big-time throws the entire year. 6 of them came on deep shots. Medium, 12.4. He was 8 of 13 for 1 touchdown. Short, 40 of 45. 42.9% of his throws were on short passes. And then 25.7 were behind the line of scrimmage. So he does maybe throw it behind the line of scrimmage a little bit more, and that some of that is the offense and the bubble screen stuff. But small sample size, but same percentages as a lot of the Ohio State quarterbacks, not named CJ Stroud, in terms of deep shots and intermediate shots. So I am wondering if Jed Fish tries some things with him. I'm taking Ohio State's quarterback room too. But that's part of the exercise here is, would we trade? My answer is no. But I don't think it's as far off of a no as maybe we talked about with Ohio and some of the other rooms we're going to talk about. The reason why it's a hard no is because he just doesn't fit Ryan Day's description of a quarterback. Not saying that 5'11", 187 can't be a good quarterback. I mean, Kyler Murray was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, and he was a Heisman Trophy winner. That's just not what Ryan Day looks for. He wants, because even Julian Sayin is on the smaller side in comparison to where you saw Will Howard, Kyle McCord, CJ Stroud, Justin Fields, Dwayne Haskins, these guys who are 6'3" and taller, 215 plus pounds. That's the prototypical NFL quarterback size is what Ryan Day goes for. And so this kid might be super talented, and I think we might walk away impressed when they play Ohio State on September 27th. But I don't think Ohio State would recruit that kid. So it's hard for the answer to be anything other than no. Minnesota's got a quarterback battle going on right now between Drake Lindsey and Zach Pyron. Pyron's the Georgia Tech transfer. Andrew, you like that name? You like that last name, Pyron?
No, you said Minnesota's got a quarterback battle on, and I pretended to be scared.
No, one's a Georgia Tech transfer, and the other one was there last year. A little bit of experience, but not much. Does anybody want to make the case for why you would think about trading Ohio State's room for Minnesota's room?
No thanks. I'm all right.
Thanks.
Well, first of all, I think Lindsey's there. I don't know what the battle is. I think Lindsey's the better guy, but maybe I'm wrong on that. But no, I'm okay with Julian Sayin. Or Lincoln Keenals, to be honest.
That's a strong vote of confidence for Lindsey.
Tanner Morgan ain't walking through that door. I'm not.
Well,
I'm
he's saying
not
that he should be the starter.
He was just like, I don't know why you guys are battling. Ew, that's fine. I'm just saying.
By the way, Minnesota, I was looking at their schedules as we were doing this. Minnesota might be 4-0 going into that game, which would be to the most maybe hilarious, like undefeated versus undefeated matchup if Ohio State gets through Texas. They play Buffalo, Northwest State, at Cal, and Rutgers before Ohio State.
This Minnesota team could be kind of nice with it. I think they've got a couple dudes on their roster.
Their running back is really good. Yeah. Darius Taylor is very, very good.
They have a defensive end, right? I can't remember his name right now.
They do.
I don't think this quarterback battle is particularly enticing, but they almost beat Penn State at home last year. I don't think this game's at Ohio Stadium, right? I don't think they put up a fight there, but I don't know if they get. I don't know what the schedule looks like. If they have Oregon at home or something like that, it could be sneaky.
By the way, this is their only.
Battle. It's just
Ohio State plays.
I don't want to talk Minnesota quarterbacks anymore.
No, nobody does. Ohio State, you really kind of realize this as you look at the schedule. Ohio State plays the Bobcats at home on September 13th. They have the Minnesota game on October 4th, and then no other home game until November 1st. So between September 14th and the end of October, they play one home game. Kind of crazy. Ohio State.
They also have 2 byes in there, so
they have 2. Yeah, they have 2 byes in there, but they have 3 out of that. This stretch of games that we're talking about: Washington, Minnesota, at Illinois, at Wisconsin.
Yeah, but
3 out of 4 of those road games
for us because we have to travel to these games. And
no, it's not so much a complaint for us. It's just I think it's interesting.
All I hear is that there's 2 weeks off in there.
You had me at Marriott points.
Yeah,
I will say during Ohio State's first bye week, I will be scouting the next quarterback we're talking about because they'll be in Bloomington.
Yeah. Are you going to go to that game?
Yeah, probably. I'll scout for you. I'll let you know.
Yeah, Luke Altmaier noise. You still can go look at some Luke Altmaier. I'm reading some things. Was Tennessee trying to poach him away from Illinois after the whole situation?
Well, it was actually objectively hilarious offseason for Altmaier. Altmaier he's actually from Starkville, so I've covered him for a bit.
Okay.
And I think as a quarterback, he's pretty good, but we can get into that. But his offseason was basically at an Illinois basketball game, he took the microphone and was like, I'm coming back. And everyone's like, holy crap, our quarterback just committed to coming back for, I don't know if it's a 50 or a 60 or whatever it was. And they went through the spring, and then it was I'm coming back because Tennessee's trying to go get him. It's well, you just told us 4 months ago you were coming back. You're coming back again?
So that was different. That was before Nico blew up college football. And then I had a chance to get more money. So far, of the non-Arch Manning level talent, recruiting talent, the non-5-star guys on the list, I think this is the best case for if you wanted to go, yes, I would trade rooms. And I think that if this were last year's roster where you didn't have any room for error, you had an older group where you couldn't bank on maybe the young guy is or isn't ready yet. You had to be 100% sure. He's almost Will Howard-like to me in terms
I literally wrote down, if you wanted a Will Howard situation more than Julian Sayin, this is probably the top guy on the schedule to go after.
Right.
This would be that arc of not super highly rated, has been around college football, kind of a dual threat guy, pretty good leader, Illinois. Illinois fans love that guy. So excited to have him back. This would be the closest thing to getting yourself a Will Howard situation. I don't know if he'll be as good as Will Howard was last year, but this would probably be the closest thing on your schedule to that.
No, but Will Howard was also 10 times better than he ever was at Kansas State. And that's because of change of environment, a better environment than he had at Kansas State. 4,600 total yards as Illinois starting quarterback the last 2 years. Sort of their starting quarterback for the last 2 years. Kind of off and on in 2023. 35 touchdowns, 16 interceptions. He's played 1,556 total snaps in his career. Stefan, I know you covered Mississippi State, but Ole Miss is right there. That's their rival. Was there Jackson Dart was just going to be the guy, so there was
just kind of. I'm pretty sure Luke had committed right before Kiffin had got there, so I just don't think like he fit. I don't think it just worked with Kiffin, like what Kiffin was trying to do with his offense and things like that.
I think if the roster description was what it was last year, I would say yes, I would take Illinois quarterback room and I would plop it in Ohio State's room. Because that's we can't be wrong. I'd rather have the guy who's played 1,500 snaps in his career, is an older guy playing with an old veteran team who just has been around the block a little bit, played some good Big Ten opponents, been in some SEC environments before. But because this is a different situation, this is a lot of youth. This is a lot of you've got guys who've been in the program for a little bit that you kind of believe in, but also you probably do need the guy to have high-end NFL, maybe first-round draft pick level arm talent. And I don't think Luke Altmaier has that. I think he's a quality quarterback. He might, maybe he sneaks into day 2 next spring. But you need a dude who's got, I might be a top 15 draft pick level arm talent with what their roster is this year and how they've constructed it. Andrew, my answer is no, I'd keep Ohio State's room, but I'd have a long conversation with my staff about changing my opinion. In fact, I think if this were the week 1 game, I'm taking Luke Altmaier, especially since it's at Illinois. But because of where it is on the schedule, where Ohio State's quarterback is going to have Texas, 2 kind of cleanup games, a Big Ten road game, another Big Ten game at home, that's enough to get your feet wet in a way that if this were week 1, I might take Luke Altmaier. And it has nothing to do with talent. It has to do with this guy I know is not going to get rattled in the situation.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much exactly what I would have said. The comparison that I kept thinking of when I was looking at the schedule and kind of mapping this out beforehand was Tyler Shuck. He just kind of strikes me as that guy who you get to 40, 45 of the NFL draft, and you're like, you know what?
I don't want Shedeur Sanders. I'm going to take Tyler Shuck.
Yeah, right. It's I don't want Shedeur. I know next year's quarterback class is supposed to be a lot better than the 2025 quarterback class was. But I could still see that second round guy where you look at the end of the year and you're like, oh, my stats were pretty good. And he goes to the Senior Bowl and has a really nice week. I think he just kind of strikes me as that veteran guy that a team could take a chance on in the second or third round. So Tyler Shuck was the guy that I thought of. But no, you're right. The arm talent for me, I think, I watched them play that Michigan game last year. That was on one of Ohio State's bye weeks, so I was able to kind of lock into that one. I think you could like him, but I don't love him. And I think he's a solid quarterback.
Do you love them?
I think I love the idea of Julian. Yeah.
I love how you guys keep dismissing Lincoln like this.
No, Lincoln can start. How many schools that we have talked about?
I've seen you publish depth chart stories.
This isn't about me right now. It's about you two.
Lincoln would not start at Texas. Would Lincoln start at Grambling State?
I'm sick of it.
I know. Would Lincoln start at Grambling State? Yes. Would Lincoln start at Ohio? Yes. Would Lincoln start at Washington?
He was committed to Washington at one point. So
maybe
that was with
he would start at Minnesota. Keenholz versus Altmaier would actually be a really, really interesting quarterback battle.
But that's part of the conversation here. We get it's the whole room.
But yeah, it's Ohio State.
True. If you would take Altmaier over Lincoln, what if Lincoln's a starter?
Yeah.
Possible. It's possible.
Yeah, you're right. I've published my own depth chart. I wrote a story at the spring game. Listen, what happened today is what we needed to all
happen. You were waiting for day-to-day of a starter after the second spring practice. You were the one being like, do we have to make this a thing?
I definitely did ask him flat out, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do But he hasn't done it yet. So I'm living here. Yes, we all think Julian Sayin is going to be the starting quarterback. But Day is talking, at least publicly, in a way that seems like the door is not shut on Lincoln being the starting quarterback. So we can't just dismiss the idea of it because I'm not going to be caught off guard if for whatever reason Lincoln Keenos ends up being this team's starting quarterback. I'm not expecting it, but if we walk in there on August 19th, and I don't even know if that's a Monday, Tuesday, right now, but if we walk in there on August 19th and day goes, Lincoln Keenos is my starter, he took some steps the last couple of weeks of fall camp where he really started to take command, I'm not going to be like, whoa, what's going on? Burn the house down. Now, granted, we might be writing pre-writes of Julian Sayin into the portal, but that's a different conversation. This game is perfectly placed where I can take Ohio State's quarterback room and feel comfortable. That's all it is. It's very...
One thing about... Or go ahead, sorry.
You brought up Andrew Tanner Morgan ain't walking through that door. That's what I'm feel. I feel CJ Stroud playing Minnesota on a Thursday night to open up Ohio State's 2021 season, where it was a little shaky for a half while Tanner Morgan looked like a dude who'd been playing college football for 5 years. Now, we know how that ended. And now one is employed by the Houston Texans, and I'm not sure what the other one is doing with his life at this point. But in that moment, at least for the first 30 minutes of it, if you were thinking, man, does Minnesota have the better quarterback right now? I don't think it was off base, even if the long-term projection was clearly that CJ Stroud was going to be better. If this game was week 1, that's what I would be thinking. But it's also, what if CJ Stroud played at Minnesota in week 6 that year? And he was doing what he was doing to Rutgers and Maryland and Michigan State and on down the list. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about this is, like, when did the Big Ten get all these quarterbacks? Like, we talked about DeMond Williams and Luke Altmaier. They might not even be the 3 best quarterbacks on Ohio State's schedule.
No. That's why this is fun.
And I think both those dudes are pretty nice with it. Like, and we're not even talking about, like, USC's supposed to be the school that was supposed to start bringing in the quarterbacks, and Oregon's not on the schedule, and they've had a run of quarterbacks. Like, the Big Ten's getting some quarterbacks. This ain't your granddad's Big Ten.
This is why it's fun. Because if we did this 3 or 4 years ago, it's like, yes, I take Ohio State. Yes, I take Ohio State. Yes, I take Ohio State. We would be living in a world where, hey, would Ohio State's third-string quarterback be the starter at half of the Big Ten schools? That's how good Ohio State is at quarterback right now. And you can still kind of do that exercise. Andrew, you were still doing it. How many schools on Ohio State's schedule would Ohio State's backup be the starter at? How many schools on Ohio State's schedule would Taven St. Clair, even if he wasn't the starter, be able to put up a fight that made the coaches think about it? But it's not, the list is not as long as it was 2 or 3 years ago. And a lot of that is to credit to Ohio State. Ryan Day showed up here and started spitting out first-round draft picks. And so everyone's like, oh, well, we got to do that now. Because if we don't, this is going to get ugly real quick.
And for our next trick, we'll introduce the Big Ten to wide receivers.
Yeah. Which is like, no. We're not just going to do one at a time, like Chris Carter here, Ted Ginn Jr. here, Santonio Holmes here. No. Michael Thomas here. No. We're going to stack 7 of them in a room and just let them all eat the whole Big Ten alive.
James Franklin has just now noticed.
Yeah, he's just figured out, I need one of those guys. Wisconsin, Billy Edwards Jr., the Maryland transfer. He'll be their starting quarterback. Andrew is shaking his head. If it was Braden Locke, Andrew, who hopped in the portal, are you still shaking your head as I'm asking the question? So it doesn't matter.
I'm still shaking my head. Look, shout out Billy Edwards. Shout out Lake Braddock High School in Northern Virginia, but no. Nope. I don't buy it. I think Billy Edwards is maybe what Wisconsin needs in terms of, you need a quarterback that can manage a game and try to run the ball. And I know Wisconsin tried to do that air raid stuff, which was just stupid from the start. And I think they're trying to get back to what they want to do in their roots. But, like, you need a quarterback that can do that. And you need a quarterback that can be a little Michigan-y, where you're frankly, I thought, he might have been an option for the Wolverines, because you don't really need a quarterback to go nuts. Obviously, we're going to get to them later, so I'll save that conversation. But
then they had 12.
You just need a quarterback to have a decent completion percentage and not screw it up and not turn the ball over and be that guy. And I think that's fine. I think that's what Billy Edwards could be. But doesn't mean he's better than Julian Sayin. Doesn't mean I'm taking him over the Ohio State room. So I'm taking Ohio State.
That is Michigan. And then they had $12 million lying around somewhere. So they decided to use that instead.
Yeah, I think there was some people that were like, "Oh God, we need a quarterback. We can't win games with throwing for 60
Some
yards
people.
anymore."
Everybody said that. Okay, Stefan. Drew Aller, former 5-star recruit, and he's about to be a third-year starting quarterback for Penn State. And it seems like there's some NFL draft pundits out there who love him. And I don't know how much of the Drew Aller conversation has boiled down to what if Penn State got him some weapons, but it feels like it's a big part of the conversation. Okay, well, Ohio State has every weapon. Is there, would you think about this even when where it's at on the schedule, and Ohio State's going to have plenty of games up under its belt by then, and this will be the last game before their second bye week and whatnot, and it's at Ohio State. But I think right now the responsible thing is to say, yes, you would take Drew Aller over Ohio State's room, even if we get to that game on November 1st and your opinion drastically changes because the quarterback will have played like 6 or 7 games.
I think I'm keeping Ohio State's room.
Really?
I was I'm ready if we got to go to war here a little bit.
Yeah, let's go.
I think to some extent we've seen the best of Drew Aller. I don't know if there's like a big step coming this next year. I think he might have some better weapons around him. I think Penn State might have a better team and win some more games. I don't know if I'm as sold on him in another year of college as some people are. Maybe I'm the outlier there. I don't know. And if you tell me I can get to November with Julian Sayin having had however many games, what is that, 7 games under his belt?
Yeah.
Of working in Ryan Day's system, being comfortable at Ohio State. I think at that point, I'm going to be telling myself, I'll keep Julian Sayin, and I'll cheat a little bit with this exercise too. I know if I get Julian Sayin, I'm also getting a better version of him in 2026. Like, I think there is jumps coming for Julian Sayin.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say like Drew Heller's hit his ceiling because I think he could be a good NFL quarterback, but like what he is in college, I just think you know what you're going to get. I think we've got to that point where you know what you're going to get, and it could be pretty good. I think Julian Sayin could be even better by that.
Let me ask you this, Andrew. Penn State wins that game on November 1st. Is one of the reasons because they had the better quarterback?
That's a good question. One of the reasons, yeah, definitely. I don't know if it's the main reason, which is kind of what I'm thinking of, because I mean, there's so much else that boils down to it. Like, we saw the 2024 game, like Ohio State should have jumped on them pretty early, and they didn't through kind of a variety of errors, right? And that game might have been ugly early, and like the defenses were a big part of that. So it's definitely one of the reasons, because if Penn State wins that game, it's because, yeah, they might have the better quarterback, but they also probably did some stuff to slow down Ohio State's receivers to a point, and they probably ran the ball pretty well with their great running game and things like that. Like, there's other parts of that, but I do think part of that has to be Aller plays better than Sayin. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at here is Penn State didn't score on offense. They also didn't have anybody to get the ball to other than Tyler.
Yeah. Well, that's why in this conversation I take Aller. And
yeah,
I love the arm talent with Aller, and I realize that there are some mistake-prone plays that he's liable to make. I think there are a lot of Penn State fans that I know who complain about Drew Aller and, he turns the ball over too much. He threw 8 picks last year. Like, it wasn't like he was like throwing it all over the yard to the other team. I thought in that Big Ten championship game against Oregon, I thought he was really good. And you look at his numbers and you go 20-39, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. He ran for 54 yards. That's not all that good. What are you talking about? They lost, blah, blah, blah. I thought he was really good. And there were some plays that he was making in that game where you just looked at and went, if he had anyone to throw the ball to, I think that would be really helpful. And I think he is kind of the inverse Ohio State argument, because for so long we've had this conversation. How is it fair to Ohio State's quarterbacks to say, oh, well, he's just throwing to this guy, so you discount the quarterback? And if that's true, we also need to have that conversation about Drew Aller, because the game that I think of was their season-ending game against Notre Dame, where I believe no receiver had a catch. And yes, that's because Notre Dame had a really good secondary. And yes, that's because they were running the ball really effectively. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. No receiver had a catch. And I know Tyler Warren was their weapon.
One wide receiver have more than 25 catches. last year.
Yeah, they didn't have anybody to throw to. And like, I understand the argument of, well, maybe Drew Aller should throw his receivers open and this and that and the other. But like, so many times we've pointed at big game and big game Aller, big game this guy can't do this in big games. And I think in 2023 that was probably true. But I also think it's true that when you play bigger and better teams and they also have bigger and better corners, it makes it harder for those receivers to get open. And I love Aller's talent. I think Aller would be awesome at Ohio State. And like, I think if you were to change the rooms, like, I think you'd feel a lot differently about Drew Aller. And I just think it's the situation that Drew Aller's in. I think Drew Aller's a better quarterback.
It just feels like Ohio State won a game last year where it threw a touchdown pass to its wide receiver 4.
Who would be like, and their wide receiver 4 or I guess their wide receiver 3 in 2023 became Penn State's receiver in 2024, and everybody went, oh, former 5-star from Ohio State going to Penn State. This is great. And this dude had 14 catches last year at Penn State. Like,
by the time he got to Penn State, his body was done. And so it's unfortunate. Fleming never really got healthy the entire time he was in college. And so it's tough. We never really got to see what the best version of him could look like outside of 2022 because his body just wouldn't hold up. But that's how Will Howard threw a touchdown pass to Ohio State's wide receiver 4 last year, while wide receivers 5 and 6 were also on the field. Meanwhile, Drew Aller had one wide receiver have more than 25 catches. Harrison Wallace III had 46 catches for 720 yards. The next closest wide receiver was Amari Evans with 21 catches for 415 yards and 5 touchdowns. If you gave when Ohio State put Jaden Ballard, Brandon Ennis, and Bryson Rogers on the field for a snap and they threw a touchdown pass, if you'd have just given Drew Aller that,
he cries of happiness at how good those receivers are.
I don't know if it changes the outcome of the game, but it's what you see in the NFL. Okay, we've got a pretty quality quarterback. Let's put some weapons around him and find out what he's made of. It does not feel like Penn State has, let's put a bunch of quality receiving weapons around Drew Aller and see what he's made of. They have this year. They wouldn't get the Syracuse transfer Stefan that we talked about earlier this week. But I don't know. This is a hyperbolic take, but it's to help make my point. If Drew Aller was Ohio State's quarterback right now, I'd be hammering home every Drew Aller for Heisman Trophy odd there is. I don't know if I feel the same way right now about Ohio State's current crop of quarterbacks. And you can say, oh, I don't know if you can be. They haven't played. Well, neither had C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields. Neither had Dwayne Haskins. And they both had Heisman odds heading into 2020, 2021 and 2019 that you could kind of wrap your head around. I don't know if I can wrap my head around that right now. So I do think right now I would take Drew Aller. By November 1st, Stefan, I'm going to join you on your side of the fence. But I just think right now, I think that's too far out on the ledge to go. If we're going to take Arch Manning as a former 5-star who's played 260 career snaps, we have to take Drew Aller as a former 5-star recruit who's played 958 career snaps and is a 2-year starter. Especially since of the 3 we're talking about here, he clearly has the worst offensive environment when it comes to receiving weapons. And he has to play for James Franklin.
That is true. I just don't know if I view him as that much more talented than Arch or Julian. I get the experience. Maybe I'm wrong with the experience part of it, just because I took Arch because he had a little more experience. So I get that. But like, this is also 7 games in, so maybe that's tilting my opinion a little bit. I don't know. I mean, also the Heisman thing. I mean, Julian's 6th in the Heisman odds, and Drew Eller's 3rd. Like, we might not be talking about Julian as a Heisman guy, but nationally, I think people know.
Yeah, but I think part of that is he's a 5-star quarterback at Ohio State, and that we've seen Ohio State have 3 straight Heisman Trophy finalists. So I think some of it is that. Like, Will Howard was probably in the top 10 at this point last year too, and so was Kyle McCord. But I'm with you. There's a good chance that Andrew and I are on your side of the fence by the time we get to that game. I just think right now it's probably the safe thing to do. Okay, let's take our final break, and then we're going to quickly run through. I think there's only 2 teams left on the schedule where we can even try to have a conversation about this. And then I wanted to throw a few other teams who are not on the schedule, but Ohio State might face them later on down the line here. We'll get into those when we come back from the break on Buckeye Talk.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. Would you rather Ohio State's room or the field? I think right now the only rooms that we have had a conversation about where you can make a case are Texas, Penn State, and Illinois. And a lot of that is based more on experience than maybe the overall talent. It doesn't necessarily say anything about what we think about what this room can produce, which is why we're talking about right now in the middle of May versus where they might be by the time they start playing. Purdue has Evans Chuba, Malachi Singleton, and E.J. Colston going through a quarterback battle with their first-year head coach. We're taking Ohio State's room. Ohio State could be starting Tavian St. Clair this year, and I'm taking Ohio State's room. Rutgers, it's Ethan Kaliakmanis. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Kaliakmanis. I have been practicing that all morning. Kaliakmanis.
I was more enamored by the first name. I didn't even get to the last name.
Ethan?
Yeah, it feels like he's missing a letter there.
Well, I mean,
I
typically
can people butcher my name all the time, so I can strike back every now and then.
Why? What do you mean, Stefan Krajisnik? And I butchered it technically because whenever we do a video, like Stefan always says it a little bit differently than Steven and I say it. And I'm like, we're saying it wrong.
With the accent because he's actually Serbian and we're not.
Yeah,
that's okay. And that's okay. He's supposed to have it down back. He's been living with it for 20 plus years. I think we take Ohio State's room over Rutgers' room, even with Ethan having some experience there.
I will say, again, going to my point about Big Ten quarterbacks, like
quality list though.
These are not like, these are not terrible. Like Malachi had spurts that he showed at Arkansas. Like Ethan, he threw for 2,700 yards last year, 250 rushing yards. Like there's not a lot of like scrubs on this list.
I think there's a chance that this is the deepest in terms of quarterback play that Big Ten has had. Because I think you can get to like 10 quarterbacks and say, okay, that's pretty quality. It doesn't mean they're all NFL players, but I think it's a pretty quality list where you've got to account for some of these guys. Ethan spent time at Minnesota before transferring to Rutgers and being their starter last year. We watched Nico play at a playoff caliber program. This is my favorite one that we're going to do because he is coming from another program who made the playoff. So this is not it's not like Drew Allar, who also made the playoff, but Tennessee's got elite offenses, no matter which way you want to put it. And then Josh Heupel just showed us last year, I can throw it and I can run it. Either way, I'm going to spread you out to 10-2 and make you guard every inch of the field. Nico or Ohio State's room, Stefan?
I'm taking Ohio State's room.
Nico,
I'm not completely sold on Nico as a player.
I didn't like how that ended. Not the transfer. I thought he did all he could. But the fact that another playoff caliber program whose head coach is a Mike Leach disciple decided not to keep discipling for a year is very telling because you can't make up for something a guy can't do. And if Josh Heupel of all coaches in college football right now looked at a quarterback and said, I can't throw the ball with you, so much so that it turned his running back into the SEC Offensive Player of the Year, Andrew, that's when you start to lose your 5-star shine for me. And if it feels like you're talking about arm talent with Julian Sayin, imagine if we were living in a world where we left spring practice like, I don't know if Ohio State can throw the ball. But much so that James Peoples is now record-breaking as a running back because Ohio State doesn't feel like he can throw the ball.
Yeah, I was thinking about this with the Drew Allar conversation. Like, if there were trades in college football, like, how many teams do you think would be like, please just give us Carnell Tate? Please, like, deny Dennis Sutton for Carnell Tate, who says no.
Tried to steal him in February, so every team.
Well, I mean, if there were trades, you don't have to, it's not just like you lose him and you get a compensatory draft pick back.
Maybe
you trade him and you get something else for him. Yeah. So it's like, all right, we'll trade Carnell. That actually might be a fun podcast. What would you do making trades?
We did this hypothetical on a pod you weren't on. It was like, how much would Texas have to give up for you to give them Jeremiah Smith? And we were like, Colin Simmons and then maybe the rest of the defense too.
And a couple future recruits to be named later.
Yeah.
I want the whole haul.
Yeah.
I want
I need the rights to Diabell. It needs to be like an NBA trade. I need the rights to Diabell, the 5-star quarterback in 26.
Thunder Clippers trade where the Thunder now have 1 million draft picks plus the MVP of the league for Jeremiah Smith. And that gets me to the table. That doesn't mean I'm signing off on it. That just gets my attention.
Yeah, we'll trade you 4 scholarship slots in 25 for 7 in 27. That'd be crazy. Yeah, the arm talent with Nico is there. I think it's a little bit Penn State-ish, like diet Penn State, to where the receivers weren't great. Like, I know they had Dante Thornton, who was a 4th-round pick, but they had Brew McCoy, who told teams not to draft him and then retired from football. Like, they didn't have a ton of talent on the edges there, but I don't know. I think he's talented. I'm not.
Would you take Allar or Nico? Stefan, would you take Allar or Nico?
It's not a debate.
Arch or Nico?
Arch.
Closer, but I think it's Arch.
I think that one's closer. But either way, I'll take Ohio State's round. Michigan with Bryce Underwood and Mikey Keene.
Well, let me add this on a Nico point too. Ohio State talks so much about like the leadership aspect of replacing Will Howard too. Nico, with how things ended at Tennessee, doesn't necessarily come across as that. Like it's worth something. Help. At quarterback, it's got to be worth something.
Yeah, it doesn't. And obviously, we don't cover Tennessee, so we don't know everything that happened. I don't know if anybody knows completely what happened, but from the outside looking in, it does not help your case. And what we do know is we've all covered college football for a while at different levels. There is not a coach on the planet who is excited about things getting public the way that the Nico thing got public. Because that type of stuff happens everywhere. But once it gets public, it becomes a whole nother beast that it never needed to become in the first place. And there's not a head coach on the planet who will tell you otherwise. Bryce and Mikey versus Ohio State's room. And you're talking about they're not going to play until the end of the year. So this one's even more interesting because it's hypotheticals on both ends. Does anybody not think Bryce Underwood's going to be their starting quarterback? Okay, so this is all
like we could have one of those like, well, we're going to see how the year goes when we play New Mexico to start the year.
Right, by the time November 29th.
The Ohio State-Michigan game, I think it's going to be Bryce Underwood.
Because Stefan and I talked about that too. This could play out very similar to 2022 with Michigan when they had JJ and Cade McNamara, where they both played early, and by the time the season got going, JJ was the starting quarterback. Okay, so if that's the case, it's Ohio State's room versus Michigan's room. Who are you taking now, and who do you think you're going to be taking by November 29th?
So I'll let Stefan ponder. He looks like he's like having a conundrum. He's having a midlife crisis here.
I gave Andrew the eyes. I'm like, I'm not ready to answer this yet.
Yeah, no. So let me go first. Right now, I take Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the year, I still take Ohio State. I think this is a let me swing for contact pick. Let me play it safe pick. It's 3rd and 2. We're going to run the ball. We're not going to throw it. Julian, to me, I think at this point of the year, and Ohio State's quarterback room at this point of the year will be at a level to where you feel really good about how good they're going to be. I feel very confident in that by the end of the year, Julian's going to look pretty good. I feel less confident that Bryce Underwood is going to look like the number 1 player in the recruiting class by November. Now, can he get there? Yeah. Like, if this is a Trevor Lawrence level prospect, if he hits, like if he is what we think he can be, by November, you're saying that Michigan has the better quarterback, the better starting quarterback in that game. If Bryce Underwood is what he can be, he's big, he can throw it a mile, he can run, he's physical, he's fast, he's got a great arm. Like, if he hits, Bryce Underwood is 1st overall pick. Wow, this guy's layup. Like, this guy's unbelievable. I can't believe that Michigan got this guy. Like, it's going to be a really, really successful situation for Michigan for a few years. But I just don't know if that's going to be the case, especially in year 1. So I think it's Ohio State. I think Ohio State now, certainly, and I think by the end of the year, I take them because I mean, you could convince me by the end of the year you see a lot of flashes with Bryce Underwood, but there are still mistakes and there are still areas of his game that need to be cleaned up that you would just see from a typical freshman. So, yeah, I take Ohio State over Michigan now and then. I think that there is room for Michigan to be better, but right now it's Ohio State.
Why is that safe?
Because I think if I wanted to be bold, you could say Bryce Underwood hits. He is Vince Young, Cam Newton, the running mobile quarterbacks that people have talked about for the last 20 years. Like, he is that type of talent. And if he hits, he is that type of player. But that feels like you're going out on a reach, and that feels like you're projecting to, okay, we haven't seen this guy play any college football, and we also need him to live up to his recruiting billing. And this guy had one spring practice period, and that was it. And at least with Julian Sayin, Julian's been in the program for a year. He's been at Ohio State for, over he's played in Ohio State games before. Like, by this point of the year, he'll have played in 11 games. Like, it feels like when you talk about Ohio State, it's okay, we can map that projection out. With Bryce Underwood, it's not crazy to say, well, there's peaks and valleys to his freshman season and his first ever season of college football. And it might not always be linear, whereas Julian, where you're kind of expecting more of a linear progression because he's been around, he's got a little bit more experience, he's been in the program. With Bryce, it might be up and down, and it might go kind of haywire a little bit at some points of the year, just with typical things that you would expect a freshman to screw up.
I cannot believe people are comparing him to Vince Young. Vince Young's 6'6", 230.
Those are the comparisons that you read. Like 247's comparison before I read that was Vince Young. There was a comparison during the recruiting cycle from another recruiting site that said he was Cam Newton.
Cam Newton's like 6'5", 250.
Yeah.
This kid's not 6'6", 250. He's 6'3", 205.
He's listed at 6'4", 208 on Michigan's website, like on their roster. No, he's not.
I don't think people understand how freakishly athletic those two quarterbacks are. Like, that's not a normal... Like, Trevor Lawrence was 6'6", 215, and he was a big dude. I think we got to be careful with some of these comparisons. I don't think that's safe saying that the dude who was the number one quarterback the year before is only a year older than Bryce Underwood is going to be awesome. I don't think that's... Like, everything you just said about Bryce Underwood, maybe he's the number one pick one day, that also could apply to Julian Sayin. The reason why he wasn't the number one player in his recruiting class is because Lil Julio was in his recruiting class. Here are the 5 people ranked higher than Julian Sayin. JJ, Ellis Robinson IV, who's a cornerback at Georgia, just finished up his first year. He only played 4 games, but again, Georgia's awesome on defense. So a 5-star cornerback at Georgia not playing in year 1 is not that crazy. Cam Coleman, who is Auburn's best wide receiver, in my opinion. Ryan Williams, who is, at worst, the 3rd best wide receiver returning in college football this year. And then Justin Williams, who's a linebacker at Georgia, which, again, he only played 4 games last year, and it's because he's at Georgia, where 5 stars. He's not the only 5-star linebacker on the roster. I would expect that Ellis Robinson IV and Justin Williams have breakout years this year. Those are the 5 guys ahead of Julian Sayin on his recruiting class. So, generational dude, awesome cornerback, awesome wide receiver, a wide receiver who's technically supposed to be a freshman this year. He was 17 years old when he did what he did to Georgia last year, and awesome linebacker. I'm picking Julian Sayin, because he's a year older and been in college football for a year, but it's just because his description, I don't think from an arm talent NFL standpoint, isn't that much different than Bryce Underwood. Bryce Underwood's just from Michigan, and it was a really big deal that they got him. And Julian Sayin is the continuation of elite quarterback play at Ohio State, while Bryce Underwood, it's essentially him and J.J. McCarthy. And Bryce Underwood's coming in there to save Michigan's quarterback room in a way that Julian Sayin doesn't have to save Ohio State's quarterback room. So the language is different. But I think I'm taking Julian Sayin now, and I think I might take him in November.
I think I agree.
No, you don't. You
had so much time to deliberate.
You haven't figured it out yet.
I genuinely don't know, because it's like, well, here's the thing for me. Like, it's going to sound like such a switch up because I just took Julian Sayin over Drew Allar, so obviously I should take Julian Sayin in the 12th game of the season over a true freshman. But I think Bryce Underwood can be significantly better than Drew Aller. Like, I think the ceiling for Bryce Underwood is very high. And I think I think where I'm just going back and forth is, does Bryce Underwood kind of hit a freshman wall like Dylan Raiola did last year? Or is Bryce Underwood, like we talked about on the last pod, is he just him? Is Michigan an 11-1, 10-2, 12-0 team that makes the playoff? Like, and he's just that good from day one. I don't know how quick he's going to get to his ceiling. And that's where I go so back and forth on it, is because I think he can do it pretty quickly. But I think I also go the safe route of, it's so, the expectations for a freshman quarterback to do that are so high to where I think a guy as a sophomore, I think Julian Sayin also has a very high ceiling. Like, I think that's been made clear so far. So it's like, do I trust Julian as a sophomore to get to that ceiling by week 12 more than I trust Bryce Underwood to get close to that ceiling by week 12? I think it's yes. I think I go with Julian Sayin. If I trust him more to be better at that point than Bryce Underwood. Now, by the end of the 2026 season, I think Bryce Underwood might be better. I think he might be the best quarterback in college football.
Possibly.
But it's so hard as a freshman to not hit that wall at some point. And do I think Bryce Underwood is a good enough prospect to transcend that? Is he at quarterback what JJ was at receiver? I don't know. I don't know if, as a freshman, if he can do that. So that's why I lean with Julian Sayin.
I am not ready to put him on the list of, I think this guy could outplay Ohio State's quarterback. Now, whether it leads to a win or not, that's a different conversation. I think there is a world that exists where Arch Manning outplays Julian Sayin or Lincoln Kinos on August 30th. There is a world that exists where Luke Altmaier outplays Julian Sayin or Lincoln Kinos when they play. Now, does that mean Illinois wins the game? I don't know. Ohio State's still more talented than Illinois. But it's a home game for Illinois. Maybe it's a big noon kickoff. Maybe it's at night. Who knows? But I would put him on that list of, given this description of where Ohio State's starting quarterback will be then, Luke Altmaier's on that list. Drew Aller is on that list for me of, yes, he can outplay Ohio State's quarterback that day. Will he or will he not? We'll worry about that in the fall. I'm not ready to put a true freshman who's had 15 practices on that list yet. And unfortunately, they don't play the type of schedule where we're going to get a real answer to that. It's an easier schedule. It's the most ideal schedule that you would want to have when you're starting a true freshman quarterback, and we're being frank about this, which is what Clemson had the year they had Trevor Lawrence. They had Texas A&M on their schedule that year, but they're in the ACC. Wasn't the most daunting schedule to get through. Andrew, it might be similar to 2023, where we spent that whole year going, yeah, Michigan's kicking butt, but they're not playing anybody. Oh, yeah, they might have been cheating. And then we get on that field, and it's like, oh, JJ's like the top 15 draft pick. Okay, cool. We'll shut up now. So I would rather Bryce Underwood proves me wrong on November 29th than to sit right here and go, just because he's the number one player in the country, he's automatically going to be that at quarterback, the same way that you can maybe be it at wide receiver. A few others I want to run through, and we can be quick because we're going super long on this. And we're going to listen, y'all might as well buckle up because they're going to get really long next week when we're arguing about who's a greater Buckeye. Dante Moore and Austin Novosad at Oregon, or Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kinos at Ohio State? Which quarterback room would you rather have, Stefan?
I think I stick with Ohio State.
Andrew?
Yeah, I stick with Ohio State, though I do think Dante Moore could be really good.
Cade Klubnik at Clemson or Ohio State's quarterback?
I think I take Cade.
Okay.
I think
I'd take Cade, but I'd be curious to see how he fits at Ryan Day's offense.
Yeah. We did that podcast before the playoff, and I think Steven came across as a ball knower when he put Klubnik like second or something, or third or something.
I put him first.
Yeah, he put Klubnik up there, and then you watch Klubnik play, and you're like, oh, damn, this kid might be really good. So, yeah, I think Klubnik is probably my answer. Klubnik might be the guy that when you get to the end of the year, like if he's the number one overall pick, he might be the guy who's like not getting talked about. Like I know Nussmeier and Sellers and Arch are getting talked about in that category, but he might be that guy that kind of jumps ahead of everybody. So I'd take Klubnik.
Yeah, I said that to somebody who knows a lot more about football than I do, and they said, really? I was like, yeah, he's pretty good. No, okay. Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi at Georgia.
I'll take Ohio State. I wasn't sold on Gunnar Stockton.
No, I was not either.
Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, and Keelan Russell at Alabama, or Keenholz, St. Clair.
LSU.
I'll take Ohio State because Alabama wanted Ohio State's quarterback. Kalen DeBoer did it, but Alabama did.
Yeah, Kalen DeBoer did. That's the thing. You mentioned this one earlier, Stefan. USC with Hassan Longstreet as a 5-star, and then Jaden Maiava, who's expected to be their starter this year. He's the guy who stole the job away from Miller Moss last year, or Julian Sayin and Lincoln Keenholz and Taven.
I'll still take Ohio State's, but this is probably the one room that, like, when it comes to talent, can probably stack up pretty well if it's reached.
Andrew?
I think that's a pretty good way to put it. I take Ohio State, but talent's there.
I would love to see Jaden Maiava, who's 6'4", 220 pounds, with Ryan Day. I might take USC's room. I think I'm going to take USC's room right now where we stand. Because it's plopping them in here. Garrett Nussmeier or Ohio State's room.
Maybe this is a hot take. I take Ohio State's. I'm not sold on Nussmeier.
Okay.
I think Julian Sayin could be way better than him.
Andrew?
That's close. I take Sayin and Ohio State's room. But like I just said, there's a lot of people hyping up Nussmeier who might be really good in 2025.
A lot of people hype up everybody. It's May. We're hyping up everybody. I think if this was last year's Ohio State description, I'd take Nussmeier. Older.
Yeah. We're
Notre
doing the
Dame,
thing where it's May and Brian Kelly as a team ready to compete for national titles. So.
Right. And so, like, we're ready to give him a ring. And then
so his quarterback's about to win the Heisman. And
right.
Yeah.
And then we're going to get to October and realize, oh, yeah, this is why we should not give Brian Kelly this benefit of the doubt. Every year. It's every year. Notre Dame with CJ Carr and Kenny McKee, which I thought it was interesting that Angeli hopped up in the portal and went to Syracuse. That piqued my interest with CJ Carr and Kenny over there, Andrew. I'll let you go first. This is your territory.
Yeah, CJ Carr, I remember like the day before their spring game, they had those three, Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr, and Steve Angeli, and Marcus Freeman said he wanted a 2-man battle, and everybody went, huh, interesting. And I think what happened was they told CJ, or they told Steve, hey man, CJ's probably going to win the job, and Angeli transferred as a grad transfer.
Right.
So Angeli leaving was interesting. Ohio State, I don't know how close it is between them and Notre Dame, but yeah, I take Ohio State pretty clearly, pretty comfortably.
I'll take Ohio State. I do like CJ Carr, though. And
CJ Carr might be really good.
I've talked about Notre Dame on here as a team that I might pick to win a national championship. So
yeah,
I think it is pretty close, but I'll take Ohio State still.
Notre Dame is the weird team where it's like they're a little Michigan-y in that like it doesn't really matter if their quarterback is like elite or not. They can win games if their quarterback is merely adequate.
Sure.
I will say, though, like
a team who's got a pretty good quarterback, and all of a sudden they can't win a national championship game because they can't.
I mean, they played a super team.
Yeah, they played a super team, but also he missed a lot of easy throws.
Yeah, I know, but enough about Northern Illinois.
I will say, if it was Angeli and Carr, I think I would seriously consider a bit more. I like the idea of having kind of a veteran there as opposed to Lincoln Keenholz being your backup.
Yeah, but Angeli leaving. If I was a Notre Dame fan, I'd be a little more excited about CJ Carr. Because Angeli was their backup last year and the guy you thought was going to be next up. When they threw him in the game to make a throw.
They put him in against Penn State.
Now, granted, he made a terrible throw, but the point of the matter is they trusted him to put him in a game in a national championship game. So if CJ Carr is good enough that they could be okay with Angeli walking out the door, I'd feel good about that. I'd take Ohio State's room, though I like chaos. So the idea of Ohio State's quarterback being the grandson of a former Michigan head coach just feels...
Oh, that's so good.
That just feels
Lloyd Carr's grandson being... Oh, it's so good.
Like, that was a big deal when he chose Notre Dame, because it's like, Michigan's so bad, they can't even get the grandson of their former head coach, who's a 5-star at the time, to commit to them. I just like chaos. Carson Beck or this room?
This room.
Did you say next?
Yeah, Carson Beck was in the portal and quote unquote Ohio State was interested. Please.
That's why
we were on the bus on the way back from like Jerry World in like an ice storm, which was definitely not safe going back in Dallas. And I remember we're all sitting on the bus reading Carson Beck has been linked to Ohio State. We all kind of looked at each other and went, no.
Yeah, I think that question got answered. Florida's room or Ohio State's room?
I'll take Florida's room. I think Florida has the Heisman winner in their quarterback room.
I do too.
Yeah, Lagway might start at Ohio State.
Lagway's a dude. Talk about a poor
Lagway might be it. Lagway might be it.
Talk about a poor sitting in a trailer park. Boy, he's good.
Oh, Florida has a preseason top 10 team in someone's poll recently. That made me giggle a little bit. We're doing that again in May.
Lagway's going to drag them to 9-3. If they go 9-3, I give him the Heisman Trophy for just surviving that.
Seriously, if they go 8-4,
he might save Billy Napier's job.
He did save Napier's job.
Well, he already has, but he might do it again this year.
By signing a piece of paper as an 18-year-old, he saved Napier's job. Nebraska's Dylan Raiola or Ohio State's room. You want to know how?
I think Dylan Raiola is going to have a really good sophomore season.
Yeah, I think Raiola is going to be awesome.
I think Ohio State told you they would pick, and then Dylan Raiola, and that thing kind of got weird. Because recruiting gets weird with quarterbacks.
Yeah.
I'll take Raiola. I'll take Nebraska. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
side with
I think they might be really, really good at quarterback with him.
I'll take Sayin. Last one, Lenora Sellers, South Carolina, or Ohio State's room.
South Carolina. I really, 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 really like Lenora Sellers. I think Lenora Sellers might be I think when we get to the end of the year, he might be Heisman candidate, first overall pick candidate. I think Sellers might be flipping awesome. So I have to take him because I don't think I've done it a ton on this podcast or at all on this podcast, but off the podcast, I have been texting people. I think this Sellers kid is going to be awesome. So I'm going to do it here. I take South Carolina's because I think Sellers might be the truth.
Yeah, I'll take Ohio State. I think Sellers will be pretty good, but I think Sayin will be better. It sounds like you feel about Sellers the way we do about Lagway, so I get where you're coming from. I'm not as high on him, though.
Do I have to be high on him? Because, South Carolina fans might.
Yeah, by the way, I was in South Carolina for a wedding last week, and your picture was at the airport being like, don't let this guy in.
I like Lenora Sellers a lot. I'd take Ohio State's room. Yeah. He feels Justin Fields-ish to me. From an Ohio State standpoint, Justin Fields was awesome. Obviously, he was a Heisman Trophy finalist. They got to a national championship with him. But it felt like going from Justin Fields to C.J. Stroud and just seeing the expansive ways they ran this offense, it felt like with Justin Fields, in hindsight, you look back on it, it was a lot of cutting the field in half. It was run game first because you had J.K. and you had an elite defense. I know all that stuff. But it was very funneled through two people while Justin Fields was here, and that was Garrett and Chris. The fact that you had 3 first-round draft picks at wide receiver and just completely ignored one of them feels like it should be a dock against Justin, especially since the following year you also had 3 first-round draft picks and all 3 of them 8. And so, I mean, granted, if it gets you to a national championship game, whatever. But I feel like with Lenore's, JJ would eat and either Carnell Tate or Brandon Ennis or Max Clare would eat. Like, it would be 2 guys. The offense would be funneled through and then maybe be easier to scheme for versus a guy where you can read the whole field and use every weapon, maximize every single weapon. So it's not about talent there. It's about who maximizes the offense more. I think the Sayin style maybe maximize this offense a little bit more, which I think, Stefan, is why both of us are so high on Lagway. It feels like he might be both of those things. He could be a playmaker himself while also he might just dice you up with his arm as well. Okay, that's our list. Let us know, 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. That was a long podcast talking about quarterback talk, and I think we got to the end of it pretty confident about where Ohio State's quarterback situation is heading into the summer months as Julian Sayin and Lincoln Keenholz continue this battle. We're going to do a Q&A pod tomorrow just to close out the week. It's more of a Q&A, but it's not more just for us to touch around things that have been happening in college football because, to be quite honest with you, the Ohio State news cycle has been slow for good reason. Nothing is happening in the Ohio State world because nothing should be happening. There's recruiting things happening, but that's because it's recruiting things happening all the time. But there's no other things going on. Players are not even in Columbus. They're kind of all over the place. I know a lot of the quarterbacks and receivers are out of California working out together. They'll start summer workouts here in the next couple of weeks here. But we're going to be doing some fun stuff here on the podcast starting next week. Our greatest Buckeye bracket. We got 170 plus names as people who should be considered in this bracket. And I've been able to boil it down to 32 names in a bracket. So we're going to spend all next week going through those, talking about some of the guys who didn't make the list, seeing if Andrew and Stefan are going to hammer home for oh, this guy should have made the list and he didn't make the list, and trying to figure out who the greatest Buckeye is in the history of the Ohio State football program. And that's not best player. That's about who embodies what it means to be a Buckeye. So get the text 614-350-3315. It's a 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that for Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. I'm Stephen Means. That was Buckeye Talk.